All right, today we're going to crack open a financial mystery that's been hiding for 500 years. And the secret? Well, it isn't in some spy's letter or a hidden treasure map. Nope. It's tucked away in the dusty old ledgers of a 15th century English family. This is the story of how they built an absolute empire, all on the back of one single revolutionary idea. Every big investigation like this starts with just a tiny clue, right? A faint whisper. And for this one, deep in the archives, that whisper came from the numbers themselves. It was this persistent hum in the records, something that just didn't quite add up, suggesting a story way, way bigger than anyone had realized. It was a thread, just sitting there, waiting for someone to pull it. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to follow that thread, and it's going to lead us to one particular family whose brilliant innovation didn't just make them incredibly rich, it actually helped reshape the entire English economy. Seriously. So what's at the very heart of this story? It's a game-changing product. And I'm not kidding when I say this wasn't just some new fabric. It was a total disruption of the entire medieval order. Let me introduce you to something called Cotswold. Now, it sounds simple enough, right? But this blend was pure genius. What the Gardner family syndicate did was fuse English wool with imported cotton. And the result? A cloth that was lighter, took dye way better, and was a heck of a lot cheaper to produce than the heavy, old-fashioned broadcloths that were dominating the market at the time. And this was a seismic shift in strategy. I mean, think about it. For centuries, England was basically just a giant sheep farm for the rest of Europe. They'd ship out all this raw wool, and weavers in Flanders would do all the high-value work. Well, the Gardners completely flipped that script. They just cut out the middlemen. They became the manufacturers themselves, seizing control of the entire value chain. So, the big question is, how on earth did a single family syndicate pull this off? How did they build a massive international supply chain back in the 1470s? I mean, the logistics alone are just staggering to think about. Well, their real mastery was in their control. They owned everything. The wool came from their own lands. The cotton came from their allies. They had the mills in Suffolk. They even had the export wharfs right there in London. It was this perfect closed loop of immense profit. It's basically a 15th century blueprint for what we'd now call vertical integration. And just look at the scale of this thing. We found a little note scribbled in the margins of an old guild ledger that mentions 18,000 pounds worth of cotton. Now, you have to understand, in the 15th century, that is an absolutely astronomical sum of money. That's the kind of cash that builds dynasties. It's the kind of money that shifts the entire balance of power. But here's the thing. This was no overnight success story. Not at all. This family had basically been in training for generations. They were secretly managing the finances for one of the most powerful noble families in all of England, and in doing so, they were honing the exact skills they would later need for their Cotswold empire. Talk about an incredible apprenticeship, right? For more than 60 years, the Gardners were the financial wizards behind the scenes for the Beauchamp Earls of Warwick. And this was a family whose income rivaled the king's. So the Gardners weren't just, counting coins. They were running a massive operation, an empire within an empire. So the really crucial point here is that they learned the entire game from the inside out. They knew how to manage huge estates, they knew how to navigate tricky customs laws, they knew how to audit revenues, and this is the most important part, they knew how to find and exploit every single loophole in the system. They were the barons' hidden treasures. Okay, but their operation wasn't just about wool and cotton. Oh no. They built this incredibly complex web of influence using everything at their disposal: spiritual protection, strategic marriages, and just raw political power. So, first up, they got themselves what you might call divine insurance. Out in the countryside, their whole wool operation in Suffolk, it fell under the spiritual protection of a local saint, Saint Etheldreda. By aligning with her cult, they weren't just seen as merchants. They were patrons. They were blending their commercial business with the sacred. And you know what? They pulled the exact same move in the city. The family's London headquarters, all their warehouses, their wharves, they were all in the parish of St. Mildred. It was such a brilliant move. They created this spiritual shield over both the rural source of their materials and the urban heart of their finances. And then came the real power plays. First, a super strategic marriage to, get this, the Cotton family. So they literally united their Cotswold money with the very pasture lands they needed. Then, after Richard Gardner dies, his wealthy widow marries Sir Gilbert Talbot. Now, this guy was a war hero, and he had direct influence over the port of Calais, which was the single most important gateway for all of English trade. Just wow. So when you start to weave all these different threads together, you've got the disruptive product, the logistical genius, generations of financial training, and this incredible web of political and spiritual connections. What you get is something truly historic. See, their empire wasn't built on just a single pillar. It was this sophisticated mix of deep financial know-how, absolute control over their supply chain, and really powerful alliances they forged through politics and marriage. Each piece of the puzzle made the others even stronger. And here it is, the bottom line. The proof is right there in the national accounts. Right at the moment the Gardner's Cotswold operation hits its stride, England's exports of finished cloth just explode. They shoot up by 50%. Meanwhile, raw wool exports totally flatline. This one family didn't just build a business. They fundamentally changed their country's entire economic destiny. When you look at it, the records reveal a family that just mastered this continuous weave of money, power, and innovation. They transformed England's economy, and they did it from the shadows. And it really leaves you wondering, doesn't it? If a story this huge could stay hidden in dusty old ledgers for 500 years, what other whispers are still out there, just waiting to be heard?